I was 29 when it happened, but the seed of this story was planted way before that, probably somewhere around my 20th birthday, when I first started noticing the small cracks in my family's foundation. My name's Tyler, and to most people who knew me growing up, I was the responsible one. The one who didn't cause trouble. The one who always showed up, paid his share, helped clean up after the barbecue, called on birthdays, and didn't ask for much. That was my role in the family, and I played it well. My sister, Melissa, on the other hand, she was the one who needed support. She was the one who had a rough time after college, the one who bounced from job to job, apartment to apartment, always with some new crisis clinging to her heels like static. But somehow, despite all that, or maybe because of it, she was also the one who seemed to get the lion's share of attention, sympathy, and, though I didn't know it at the time, something much bigger. Now, don't get me wrong. I didn't hate my sister. Melissa and I weren't close, but we weren't exactly estranged either. We texted on holidays, exchanged stiff hugs at family gatherings, and made small talk over mashed potatoes at Thanksgiving. It was a civil, if distant, relationship. I figured we were just two adults going in different directions. I had a stable job in software engineering, a condo an hour from my parents' place, and a life I'd built through long hours and sacrifice. Meanwhile, she was still living just 20 minutes away from them, dropping by their place almost daily, always needing something, whether it was money, help with rent, or just someone to listen to her latest drama with a boyfriend who didn't get her. Our parents, well, they never said it out loud, but they treated her like a fragile glass ornament and me like a sturdy old tool they could always rely on. And I accepted that, for a while. Because that's what you do when you're the responsible one, right? You shrug it off. You keep being helpful. You pick up the tab at dinner when Melissa forgets her wallet. You quietly cover half of the utilities when mom and dad's heater breaks down. You nod and smile when they talk about how proud they are of Melissa for applying to a new job, even if it's the third time this year. You tell yourself they love you both equally. You tell yourself not to keep score. But the truth? I had been keeping score for a long time. I just never expected to find the ledger written down in black and white. It started with an innocent question. I was over at my parents' house one Sunday afternoon, fixing the kitchen sink, again. They always called me when something broke, because I knew how to handle these things, which meant I had watched a YouTube video once and owned a wrench. Melissa wasn't there that day, which was rare. She usually popped in around dinner. Mom was in the living room, flipping through a stack of mail, and Dad was half listening to the game on TV. We were making small talk when I asked something offhand. Hey, whatever happened with the refinancing stuff you mentioned last month? Mom blinked. Oh, that's all sorted. We added Melissa to the deed, so things are easier when we're older. I paused mid-tighten on the pipe. Wait, you put her name on the house. Just makes sense, she said with a shrug. She's always around. Helps out when we need her. And she's not as set as you are. You've got your own place. Your own thing going. I didn't say anything right away. Just stared at the sink for a long second, the wrench suddenly feeling a lot heavier in my hand. My mind was spinning in this slow, disorienting way, like I'd been shoved underwater without warning. They put her name on the house. Without telling me, just handed over partial ownership of the home they had always claimed would go to both of you someday. Dad chimed in without looking away from the TV. Don't overthink it, Ty. It's just paperwork. Doesn't change anything. But it did. It changed everything. I finished fixing the sink in silence. When I stood up and wiped my hands on the towel, something in me felt different. Not angry, not yet. More like a switch had flipped. A light bulb turned on in a room I didn't know was dark. That night, I lay awake turning it over in my mind. All the things I'd done over the years. The bills I'd helped cover when Dad lost his part-time job and didn't tell Melissa. The groceries I had quietly ordered to their house during COVID. The countless times I'd driven over to fix, repair, replace, solve. And now this, Melissa, who never paid a dime toward the house, who lived like a boomerang, bouncing between apartments and jobs, was on the deed. Just like that. Because she was always around. That phrase echoed in my head like a mosquito buzz I couldn't swat. Always around. I guess being reliable gets you respect until someone decides presence matters more than contribution. I tried to let it go. Really, I did. I told myself I didn't want the house. I had my own. I told myself Melissa probably needed the security. I told myself it wasn't worth causing a scene over. But deep down, it wasn't about the house. It was about the fact that they didn't even think I deserved to be part of the conversation, that they made a decision, one that cut me out, and just expected I'd be okay with it. And for a few weeks, I pretended I was. Until the next time Mom called asking if I could cover their electric bill because things were a little tight this month. That's when something in me shifted again. Slower this time. Colder. I said I'd think about it. And then I didn't send a cent. Not for the electric bill. Not for the water. Not for the emergency groceries when their card got declined at the store. For the first time in years, I let the silence stretch. A week later, Melissa texted me. Hey, Mom said you're being weird about helping. Is everything okay? I didn't reply. 2 weeks after that, Dad left me a voicemail. Just wanted to say we love you. And if you're upset about something, we should talk. I didn't call back. And then, a full month after I stopped paying their bills, it came. A text from Mom. Simple and direct. We need money for house repairs. Can you help? I stared at that message for a long time. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. So many things I could say. So many ways I could finally let them know how it felt to be the afterthought. But in the end, I only sent one sentence. And the moment I hit send, I knew everything was about to change. My reply to Mom's message was 7 words long. Ask the one whose name is on it. That was it. No anger, no explanation, no emotional outburst. Just a single sentence loaded with everything I had kept buried for years. The years of being treated like a backup plan, while Melissa got to play the main character in a family story I'd clearly been miscast in. I stared at the message for a few minutes after I sent it, half expecting an immediate response. None came. Not that night, not the next morning. But silence has a way of making noise when people are used to your compliance. And within days, the cracks started to show. First came the passive-aggressive group text from Melissa. Not sure what's going on, but Mom and Dad really need help right now. I don't have the money. Wish I did. I'd step up if I could. It was a thinly veiled jab, one that might have guilt me 5 years ago. Not anymore. I didn't answer. 3 days later, Dad called. I let it ring. Then he tried again. Voicemail this time. Ty, look, your mother's upset. You know this house is important to all of us. Melissa's name being on it was just a formality. You'll still be taken care of, I promise. But we can't make these repairs without help. Taken care of. Like I was some child promised a slice of cake at the end of dinner. I deleted the voicemail without listening to the rest. That was the moment I realized they didn't understand yet. They thought this was a phase, that I was sulking and just needed time to cool off. But they didn't know that something fundamental had changed. I wasn't being dramatic. I wasn't waiting for an apology. I wasn't hoping for a heart-to-heart where everyone finally saw things from my side. I was done. Done being the fallback. Done carrying responsibilities that weren't mine. Done watching my parents reward Melissa for being dependent while quietly draining me for being dependable. And right around the time they began to feel the weight of that absence, Melissa did something that ripped the last bit of sympathy I had for her clean out of me. I found out through a friend, not even through the family. My buddy Kevin, who's known me since high school and still lives a few blocks from my parents, texted me one evening out of the blue. Hey man, weird question. Did you sell your parents your old patio set? I blinked at my phone. What? He sent a photo. It was unmistakably my old outdoor furniture, black iron table, curved chairs, the glass top with the slight chip on the left corner. I'd stored it in my garage since moving into my condo because I didn't have a yard anymore. Nobody had touched it for months. But there it was, sitting in my parents' backyard. Kevin said Melissa told his girlfriend she'd scored it for free from her generous brother. That was news to me. I drove over the next day just to confirm. I didn't even go inside. Just parked across the street and stared at the backyard. Sure enough, there it was, my set up nicely on the freshly cleaned patio, with a potted plant I definitely hadn't left on the table. That night, I texted Melissa. Hey, when were you going to ask before taking my patio set? She replied 10 minutes later. Mom said it was fine. It was just sitting there. You weren't using it. No apology. No acknowledgement that she'd crossed a line. Just more entitlement disguised as casual explanation. I didn't answer. 2 days later, she texted again. You're being really petty about this stuff. We're family. It's just a table. Do you really need to make everything a problem? That's when I realized she genuinely believed this was all just furniture. A few bills. A name on a document. She didn't see the years of imbalance. The slow bleed of respect. The erosion of boundaries. She just saw a brother who had always given and suddenly stopped, and it made her uncomfortable. But the table wasn't the real betrayal. That was just the surface layer. What came next, though? That was the punch to the gut. I was visiting my aunt, Mom's sister, about 2 weeks later. She and I had always gotten along well. She'd never treated me like an afterthought. She made good coffee, gave great advice, and never once asked me to fix anything when I visited. I think she always knew more than she let on, but she stayed out of it. We were sitting on her porch, watching the sunset when she glanced over and said, "So, you and your parents still not talking?" I gave a small shrug. "Not really. Figured I'd let them sit with it for a bit." She nodded. "You know they took your name off their living trust, right?" The words didn't register right away. "What?" She hesitated. "I probably shouldn't be telling you this, but I thought you already knew. Your mom told me they made some changes last month. Said it didn't make sense to split everything when Melissa was the one who'll be taking care of them someday." I stared at her. I couldn't breathe for a second. My ears rang. "You're serious?" She nodded slowly. I told her it was a mistake. "She just said you were doing fine on your own." That phrase again. Doing fine. It had become the excuse for every betrayal, every act of exclusion, every quiet reallocation of love, trust, and resources. I left my aunt's house in a daze. I don't remember the drive home. I just remember sitting in the dark afterward, on the edge of my bed, and feeling something in me crack. Not loudly, not like a movie scene where someone screams and throws a lamp. No, this was quiet, like the gentle snap of ice forming a fissure under pressure. They took me off the trust, without telling me, without asking, without even having the decency to hint at it in all those conversations about the future we'd had when I helped them budget or fix the roof or organize their taxes. All those years I was the reliable one, doing fine, and they erased me from the plan because Melissa was around. The next few days passed in a fog. I didn't eat much. I didn't answer texts. I didn't go to the gym. Just kind of floated through the hours. My condo was quiet, peaceful, even, but it didn't feel like home. Not that week. I kept replaying things in my head. Every moment where I let something go. Every time I didn't speak up. Every bill I paid. Every favor I did. Every holiday where I watched Melissa stumble in late and still get praised for being thoughtful. And I realized that I hadn't just been keeping score. I'd been hoping the scoreboard would eventually matter. But it never did. Until now. Because here's the thing. I wasn't just removed from a document. I was removed from the equation. And in that silence, I made a decision. Not to confront. Not to demand. Not to yell or rage or beg. I decided to step away completely. But not quietly. If I was no longer part of the family equation, then they would finally learn what it meant to lose the part that kept the machine running behind the scenes. And I had a plan. There's this weird thing that happens when you hit a wall emotionally. At first, you feel like you're just floating. Not in some poetic, peaceful way, either. More like you're drifting in space with no air, watching your life from outside your own body, wondering how you got here. After finding out I'd been removed from the living trust, I didn't rage or cry or call them to scream. I didn't write some dramatic email or craft a long, heartfelt message begging them to understand. I just shut down. Quietly. Cleanly. I turned off the faucet. No more calls. No more visits. No more help. For the first time in my adult life, I drew a clear line, and I didn't budge. At first, it was liberating. My phone didn't light up with "Can you swing by?" texts. I didn't spend weekends elbow-deep in leaky plumbing or debugging my dad's ancient laptop. I didn't worry about whether Melissa was going to guilt-trip me into splitting her rent just this once. But that freedom had a price, and I felt it hard. See, when you've built your identity around being the one people can count on, you don't realize how much of your self-worth is tied to other people's problems. I wasn't just grieving the betrayal. I was grieving the version of myself I'd always been for them. The helper, the problem solver, the safety net. Without that role, I didn't know who I was anymore. I stopped answering calls from extended family, not out of bitterness, but because I couldn't stomach the small talk. I avoided social events. I even started skipping gym sessions, which had always been my sanctuary. My routine fell apart. I stopped cooking, let laundry pile up, and worked just enough to get by. My boss noticed. He didn't say anything at first, but eventually, we had a talk. "You all right, Tyler?" he asked one morning, catching me zoning out during a team meeting. I gave the usual answer. "Just a lot on my plate lately." He nodded, but the concern lingered in his eyes. I knew I had to pull myself out of it, but motivation felt like a distant memory. Every time I tried to get back on track, my mind wandered back to that conversation with my aunt. The trust, the deed, the fact that I could dedicate my life to being the good son and still get cut out the moment I wasn't useful. But then something shifted, not all at once, but gradually. It started with the patio set. I don't know why it bugged me so much. It wasn't about the table, obviously. But every time I thought about Melissa dragging it into their backyard like it was hers, like she had a right to just take whatever she wanted and expect me to be okay with it, I felt this slow-burning anger that wouldn't go away. So I got in my car, drove to their house early one Saturday morning, and reclaimed it. Didn't knock. Didn't announce myself. Just walked into the backyard like I owned the place. Because for most of my life, it had been mine in a way. I took the table apart, loaded it piece by piece into my trunk, and drove off. Nobody was home. It felt petty, but it also felt good. That small act of reclaiming something, anything, snapped me out of my funk just enough to remember what it felt like to take action. That same week, I started journaling again. I hadn't done that since college, but it felt necessary. I needed to get the noise out of my head. The first few pages were raw, just ramblings, curses I won't repeat here, and messy thoughts. But after a few entries, the noise settled. The writing turned into plans, goals, ideas. I made a list of all the things I'd put on hold for the sake of my family over the years. One of them was starting my own business. I'd always talked about launching a software tool, something niche, something useful. Back in 2020, I'd even built a prototype for a scheduling app tailored for freelance photographers. I had a couple of photographer friends who loved it, but I shelved the project when Dad lost some of his income, and I picked up freelance work to help them stay afloat. Now, with all this free time, and no more surprise bills showing up from Mom, I decided to dust it off. I worked on it quietly, late at night, headphones on, eating microwave dinners while coding like I was back in college. It gave me purpose, gave me momentum. I didn't talk to anyone about it, not because I was trying to be mysterious, but because I didn't want anyone's approval. I just wanted to do something for me. And slowly, I started coming back to life. The gym became routine again. I changed my diet. I reconnected with a few old friends, people I hadn't talked to in years because I was always too busy helping the family. One of them, Jordan, invited me to join his hiking group. I almost said no, but something in me whispered, say yes. That first hike was brutal. I was out of breath halfway up the trail, legs burning, lungs on fire. But the view at the top? Worth it. More than that, it felt symbolic. Like I was physically climbing out of the pit I'd been wallowing in for months. That night, I slept like a rock for the first time in ages. Meanwhile, the app was starting to take shape. I spent my evenings building features, testing bugs, and designing a clean UI. I'd post updates on a small dev forum, and the feedback was encouraging. People were genuinely interested. A few months in, I launched a beta, got a few dozen signups, then 100. Then one of my photographer friends shared it on her Instagram, and it exploded. Not viral level, but enough to get noticed in the niche. I woke up to emails from users in 3 different countries. Real people, real problems my app was solving. It felt unreal. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just helping people in the background. I was building something that mattered, and it wasn't for my parents, or my sister, or anyone else. It was for me. That's when I realized something deeper. My entire life, I had been trying to earn their validation, playing the role, carrying the weight, hoping that one day they'd turn around and say, "We see you. We appreciate you." But that day never came, and maybe it never would. And somehow, that was okay now, because I had built something on my own, without their help, without their permission. And then, right when I was finally finding peace in that independence, I got a text that reminded me the storm hadn't passed. It had just been gathering. It was from Melissa. "Hey, just a heads up, Mom and Dad are talking about selling the house. Said they're thinking of buying something smaller and putting the rest toward retirement. I told them they should probably talk to you first." She even added a smiley face at the end, like we were just 2 siblings casually coordinating. But all I saw was red. Selling the house. The house I'd spent years maintaining. The house I'd helped pay for when they were struggling. The house that, until recently, had been promised to both of us equally. And now they were thinking of selling it, without me. The worst part wasn't the betrayal. It was the fact that they weren't even trying to hide it anymore. They didn't expect me to be part of the conversation because, in their minds, I wasn't. I had been written out of the story, but they underestimated something important. I may have been quiet. I may have been distant, but I wasn't powerless. Because what they didn't know, what they had no way of knowing, was that I hadn't just been rebuilding my confidence. I'd been documenting everything. Every bank transfer, every utility bill I covered, every time I paid for repairs or maintenance or groceries. I had receipts going back 5 years. Even screenshots of texts from Mom and Melissa confirming I'd paid certain things until they got back on their feet. I hadn't planned on using any of it. Not originally. But if they were going to play games with property and money, then maybe it was time I stopped being the background character in this story. Maybe it was time I reminded them exactly how much I'd invested, and just how much I had left to lose. They always thought I didn't keep track. That was their first mistake. See, for years, my family had operated on this unspoken dynamic. I helped, they expected. I gave, they took. No drama, no questions. I wasn't loud about it. I didn't wave receipts in anyone's face. I just handled things, quietly, efficiently, the way a good son was supposed to. But underneath that calm surface, I kept everything. Every dollar. Every transaction. Every favor disguised as just a quick thing. And now, with Melissa's casual text about them selling the house, it all clicked into place. They had no intention of circling back to me. I wasn't going to get a say in anything. Not after they'd added Melissa to the deed, removed me from the trust, and shut me out of decisions I'd spent over a decade helping them navigate. I could see it playing out before it even happened. They'd sell the house, maybe gift Melissa the proceeds in some roundabout way to avoid taxes, and I'd be left watching from the sidelines, told to be grateful because I was doing fine. But they didn't realize something. I wasn't just a guy with hurt feelings anymore. I had leverage, and I was ready to use it. The first step was getting organized. I spent an entire weekend digging through emails, online banking records, and old text threads. I exported PDFs of bank statements showing every time I'd paid their water, electricity, or gas bills. Screenshotted messages from Mom asking for help with a surprise car repair. Pulled receipts from when I covered Melissa's half of a vacation they insisted she'd pay me back for. She never did. I even had Venmo notes labeled Mom's Meds and Roof Patch 2021. I didn't realize how much I'd contributed until I saw it all laid out in a spreadsheet. Total, $38,227.17. That's what I'd spent over 8 years, just on them. That didn't even include the interest I lost on savings or the freelance projects I'd passed up when they needed help moving furniture, fixing a leak, or dog-sitting just for a day that turned into a weekend. Looking at the number made my stomach twist. Not because I wanted the money back, but because they discarded me like I hadn't already paid my share. Like I was just some distant relative with no stake in the family estate. That was about to change. The next step was confirming the status of the house. I had a suspicion, but I wanted to be sure. So I pulled up the county's property records website and searched their address. And there it was. Melissa, listed as co-owner. Added 7 months ago. No liens, no mortgage refinance. Just a straight-up deed transfer, parents to daughter. Likely using a quitclaim deed, which meant it happened quietly, without triggering red flags. I stared at the screen for a long time. She didn't pay a dime for it. Didn't lift a finger during the years I was pouring time and money into that house. But now, she had legal standing. She owned part of it. That should have been the part that broke me. But it didn't. Because I had something better than ownership. I had proof. And a plan. Step 1 was legal. I wasn't going to go full courtroom drama, but I wanted to know where I stood. So I called an attorney. Not some billboard, we get you cash, guy. I found a small, highly rated estate attorney in town named Harold who specialized in family disputes and financial contribution claims. We met over coffee. I brought my spreadsheet, my screenshots, my receipts, and my story. He listened quietly, barely interrupting as I laid it all out. When I finished, he leaned back, folded his hands, and said, "Let me guess, they didn't put anything in writing?" "Not officially," I said, "but I've got texts, emails, a record of all my payments." He nodded. "Good. That's more than most people in your situation have." I was surprised. "So, is there anything I can do? Legally, I mean." He tapped the table. "Potentially. If they sell the house and you've made substantial contributions to its upkeep or improvements, especially if there was an implied understanding of future benefit, we can pursue something called a resulting trust claim or even an equitable contribution claim. It's not guaranteed, but it's strong enough to make them think twice about shutting you out. I blinked. Wait, so I could sue them? For part of the house proceeds. You could threaten to. Whether you follow through or not depends on what you want out of this. That was the moment the gears started turning. I didn't want a legal war. I wasn't trying to ruin anyone's life. But if they were going to erase me from the picture, then maybe a well-timed reminder of what I brought to the table was exactly what they needed. And it had to come from the one person they never expected it from. Me. Step 2 was timing. I didn't confront them right away. I waited. I watched. Melissa's text had been vague, thinking of selling, which meant the process was still in motion. So I bided my time. Polished my app. Attended networking events. Went on hikes. Even started dating again. Meanwhile, Harold drafted a letter. Not a lawsuit. Just a formal notification of intent to pursue compensation in the event of a sale, citing financial contributions, documented proof, and a clear pattern of expectation built over years. It wasn't aggressive, but it was firm, and I held on to it. For the right moment. That moment came 3 weeks later. I got a text from Mom. The first in over 2 months. Hey sweetheart, I know things have been weird, but we'd really love to have you over for dinner next Sunday. Just us. Melissa won't be there. Let's talk. I stared at it for a while. And then I smiled. Perfect. I showed up at their house that Sunday with a bottle of wine and an envelope in my coat pocket. They greeted me like nothing had happened. Mom hugged me a little too long. Dad gave me one of those firm, manly pats on the back. The kitchen smelled like roast chicken and garlic, the exact kind of meal they always made when they were trying to smooth things over. We sat down, ate, made small talk, laughed at a few stories. And then, halfway through dessert, Mom set down her fork and said, "We want to talk to you about something, and I want you to listen before you say anything." I leaned back, hands folded in my lap. "We've decided to sell the house," she said. "We just can't manage the upkeep anymore. The plan is to move into a smaller place, something single level, closer to Melissa. She'll help out more that way." "Of course she will." Dad jumped in. "We know this might come as a surprise, but we've talked it through. We're going to split the proceeds with Melissa and use the rest to secure our retirement." That's when I knew. They were offering me nothing. They didn't even try to dress it up. "No, we'll talk about your share." No mention of everything I'd done. Just a cold, polite conversation about their future, with me placed neatly outside of it. I pulled out the envelope. Set it on the table. "What's this?" Dad asked. "Documentation," I said. "Every dollar I've contributed to this house over the last 8 years. Bills, repairs, groceries, payments. It's all there, along with a letter from my attorney." Mom's face went pale. "Tyler, what is this?" "I'm not suing you," I said calmly. "Yet. But if you plan to sell this house and leave me with nothing, I want you to understand something. This isn't just emotional anymore. This is financial, and I have every right to pursue compensation for what I've put into this property. You can split the proceeds however you want, but if my name isn't on that list, then you'll be hearing from Harold." Silence. Not angry silence. Stunned silence. They hadn't expected this version of me. The son who didn't shout, didn't beg, didn't cry. The son who kept receipts. Mom's lip trembled. "You would really take us to court?" "If I have to," I said, standing up. "But I'd rather not. I'd rather we have an honest conversation about fairness, about respect, about not treating me like a walking bank account while rewarding Melissa for being around." Dad opened the envelope. Scanned the spreadsheet. The numbers hit him hard. I saw it in his face. "I don't want to fight," I added, "but I won't be erased." And with that, I walked out. Calm, collected, clear. The setup was complete. Now all I had to do was wait for their next move. They didn't call the next day, or the day after that. I expected one of them to reach out, maybe a defensive voicemail from Dad, or a guilt-laced text from Mom. But the silence stretched. A week passed, then another. It wasn't until day 12 that I finally heard something. This time, it was Melissa. "I heard you threatened to sue Mom and Dad." "Seriously?" "No, hey. No pleasantries. Just straight to the point." I didn't respond. 3 minutes later. "This is low even for you. You're really going to take them to court after everything they've done for you?" That line almost made me laugh. Everything they've done for me? I wanted to ask if she meant the unpaid housework, the thousands of dollars, the broken promises, the uninvited betrayal on the deed. But I didn't give her that satisfaction. Let her stew in the version of events she'd built to protect herself from any sense of responsibility. By the end of the week, a formal email arrived. From my parents. Polite. Sterile. Probably drafted with the help of a lawyer. They had reconsidered the distribution of the home sale and were open to a conversation about equitable financial resolution in light of the historical contributions I had made. They even acknowledged, in writing, that I'd supported them financially on numerous occasions. That wasn't just a win. That was leverage. I didn't rush to reply. Let them sweat a little longer. I forwarded the email to Harold and scheduled one last meeting. We drafted a response. Again, no threats, no drama, just calm professionalism. I asked for $45,000. It was more than I'd spent, but less than what I'd be entitled to in court if we factored in interest, inflation, and lost opportunities. It was a fair offer. They agreed. Without protest. The revenge, in the end, wasn't loud. It wasn't fire and fury. It was paper. Calm, collected, legal pressure, the kind of thing people like my parents never expected from someone like me. The sale went through the next month. I received a direct wire transfer of $45,000, plus an additional $1,500 to cover legal costs, though they didn't say it outright. No apology letter. No follow-up call. Just silence. Melissa didn't reach out again, but I did hear about her eventually. Apparently, after they moved into their new place, a modest 2-bedroom condo closer to her apartment, things got complicated. My parents, now used to relying on me for every little crisis, found Melissa's brand of help lacking. She didn't want to run errands, didn't answer her phone at night, started ducking out of weekend visits with vague excuses. After all the years they'd invested in enabling her, they were finally learning what it meant to rely on someone who wasn't built for it. A few months later, I got an email from my mom. It was short, just 4 lines. Tyler, I hope you're doing well. I just wanted to say we miss you. Things haven't been the same. If you're open to it, maybe we can talk sometime. Love. Mom. I stared at the screen for a long time. She had my number, my address. She could have picked up the phone, but she didn't. She sent a cold email, like she was applying for an interview. I didn't reply, because here's the truth. Revenge doesn't always have to be fire and brimstone. Sometimes, the best revenge is letting people feel the weight of your absence, letting them sit in the silence they created, letting them realize too late that they pushed away the only person who never needed to be asked for help. I used their money to fund the second phase of my app, hired a small team, upgraded the servers, invested in better marketing. 6 months later, we hit 10,000 active users. Revenue was steady. My calendar was full. And my life? Peaceful. No more emergency calls. No more passive-aggressive messages. No more quiet expectations that I'd sweep in and fix the chaos they created. They taught me that family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by respect. And once that's gone, you don't owe them anything. Not even a reply. That was the last time I ever heard from them. And I didn't miss them. Not even a little.